Adelphia looked like a cable company success story. It had millions of subscribers. It had a growing business. It had a powerful founding family. And to investors, it looked like a serious public company. But prosecutors said something very different was happening behind the scenes. The family that controlled Adelphia was accused of using the company like a personal piggy bank. Debt was hidden. Money was moved. Corporate funds were used for private benefit. And when the truth came out, Adelphia collapsed into one of the largest corporate scandals of the early 2000s. This is the story of Adelphia. A cable empire built by a family. A public company controlled like a private kingdom. And a fraud that showed what can happen when power, money, and weak oversight all sit in the same room. Adelphia Communications was founded by John Rigas. It started as a small cable business in Pennsylvania. Over time, it grew into one of the largest cable companies in the United States. The story sounded classic. Small-town founder, family business, hard work, growth, expansion, success. That kind of story can be powerful because it feels trustworthy. A family company can feel stable. A founder-led company can feel personal. And a business built over decades can feel safer than a flashy new startup. But family control can also create risk, especially when the company becomes public, but the culture still behaves like the business belongs to the family alone. That was the danger inside Adelphia. The company was public. Investors owned shares. Creditors lent money. Employees depended on the business. But prosecutors said the Rigas family treated Adelphia's money and credit like their own. The scandal centered on hidden debt and self-dealing. Adelphia had complex arrangements involving co-borrowing agreements. In simple terms, the company and Rigas family entities were connected through debt arrangements that made the true financial picture harder to see. The public company carried risk that investors did not fully understand. Debt matters because it tells investors how much pressure a company is under. If debt is hidden, the company can look stronger than it really is. A company with less visible debt looks safer. It may look more profitable. It may look more valuable. It may be able to borrow more money. It may keep investor confidence longer. But hidden debt does not disappear. It waits. And when investors finally see it, trust can collapse instantly. That is what happened with Adelphia. In 2002, the company disclosed billions of dollars in off-balance sheet debt tied to the Rigas family. The market reaction was brutal. Investors realized the company's financial picture was not what they believed. The stock fell. Trust evaporated. And Adelphia soon filed for bankruptcy. The scandal did not feel like a normal business failure. It felt like a betrayal. Because investors were not just looking at a company that made bad business decisions. They were looking at a company where insiders allegedly used corporate resources for personal benefit. That is where the story becomes even more disturbing. Prosecutors accused members of the Rigas family of using Adelphia funds for personal expenses and private projects. The allegations included using company money and credit for luxury purchases, family ventures, and personal benefit. That is why Adelphia became more than an accounting case. It became a governance case. It showed what can happen when a public company does not have enough independent control over powerful insiders. The core problem was not just debt. The core problem was control. Who had power? Who approved transactions? Who challenged the family? Who protected shareholders? Who said no? In a healthy public company, there should be checks and balances. The board should challenge management. Auditors should verify the numbers. Executives should protect the company. Related party transactions should be carefully reviewed. And insiders should not be able to treat company assets like personal property. At Adelphia, prosecutors said those protections failed. That is why the scandal became so damaging. The company's business may have been real. The cable customers were real. The network was real. The revenue was real. But the governance structure was broken. A real company can still collapse if the people controlling it abuse trust. That is the key lesson. Fraud does not always come from a fake business. Sometimes it comes from a real business controlled by people who stop respecting the line between company money and personal money. Adelphia shows that line matters. A public company is not a family wallet. Corporate debt is not private credit. Shareholder money is not insider money. Company assets are not personal toys. But when those boundaries get blurred, disaster can follow. The psychology of the Adelphia scandal is simple. Success created comfort. The company had grown for years. The family had built the business. People may have assumed the founders knew best. And when a founder or family has a long history with a company, others may hesitate to challenge them. That hesitation can be dangerous, because the more powerful the insider, the more important the oversight. Strong founders need strong boards. Family companies need clean governance. Public companies need transparency. Without that, loyalty can become silence, and silence can become permission. Adelphia also shows why related party transactions are so risky. A related party transaction happens when a company does business with people or entities connected to insiders. Those transactions are not always illegal. Sometimes they are legitimate. But they need extra scrutiny because the conflict of interest is obvious. If the people on both sides of the deal are connected, who is protecting the company? Who is making sure the terms are fair? Who is making sure the transaction is disclosed? Who is making sure the public shareholders are not being harmed? At Adelphia, the relationship between the public company and Rigas family entities became a major problem. The financial web was complicated, and complexity can hide risk. That is another major lesson. When a company's structure is too hard to understand, investors should slow down. Complexity is not always fraud, but complexity can become camouflage. It can make debt harder to see. It can make cash flows harder to track. It can make accountability harder to enforce. And it can make insiders more powerful than they should be. Adelphia's collapse came during the same era as Enron and WorldCom. That matters because the early 2000s were a turning point in corporate America. Investors were learning that large public companies could hide enormous problems. Enron hid debt and used complex structures. WorldCom turned expenses into assets. Adelphia exposed hidden debt and insider abuse. Different mechanisms. Same bigger issue. Investors could not trust the numbers. And when investors cannot trust the numbers, the entire market becomes more fragile. Adelphia helped reinforce the demand for stronger corporate governance, better disclosure, and more accountability. The scandal became part of the corporate fraud wave that changed how people thought about boards, executives, auditors, and financial reporting. For investors, Adelphia teaches several warning signs. First, watch insider control. A founder or family can be a strength, but concentrated power can become dangerous when oversight is weak. Second, watch debt. Debt that is hard to understand should never be ignored. Third, watch related party arrangements. If the company is heavily entangled with insider-controlled entities, the risk is higher. Fourth, watch transparency. If management cannot clearly explain where the money is, who owes what, and who benefits, something is wrong. For executives, the lesson is even clearer. Once a company becomes public, the rules change. You are no longer running a private family shop. You are responsible to shareholders, creditors, employees, and the market. The money belongs to the company. The reporting must be honest. The debt must be visible. And the board must be able to challenge leadership. If leadership cannot accept that, the company is not ready for public trust. For boards, Adelphia is a warning about independence. A board that cannot challenge insiders is not really protecting shareholders. A board that rubber stamps management is not governance. A board that does not understand the debt structure is not doing its job. Oversight is not decoration. It is the system that keeps power from becoming abuse. That is why this scandal still matters. Adelphia was not just about cable. It was about trust. Investors trusted the public filings. Creditors trusted the debt picture. Employees trusted the leadership. Customers trusted the company. But behind the public image, prosecutors said the people in control were hiding the real financial condition and using company resources for private benefit. That is why the collapse hit so hard. Because the company did not just lose money. It lost legitimacy. The Rigas family members were later convicted in connection with the fraud. John Rigas and his son Timothy were sentenced to prison. The company went through bankruptcy and its assets were eventually sold. The family cable empire was broken, and Adelphia became a case study in what happens when corporate governance fails at the highest level. The tragedy is that Adelphia did not have to be a fake business to become a fraud story. It had real customers, real infrastructure, real revenue, real employees. But that was not enough. A real business still needs honest reporting. A real business still needs clean controls. A real business still needs a board that can say no. Without those things, even a company with real assets can collapse under hidden debt and insider abuse. That is the final lesson of Adelphia. Fraud is not always loud. Sometimes it hides inside family loyalty. Sometimes it hides inside complex debt. Sometimes it hides inside a company that looks stable because it has been around for years. And sometimes the biggest danger is not the business model. It is the people who control the business. Adelphia looked like a cable success story. But behind the scenes, prosecutors said billions in debt were hidden, company money was misused, and public investors were misled. The company was real. The cable systems were real. The customers were real. But the trust was broken. And once trust breaks, the business can fall apart fast. If you want more corporate collapse and financial fraud breakdowns, subscribe to the channel. And watch the next video, because Adelphia was not the only company where hidden debt destroyed the story.